Everyone, welcome to the Unfiltered Podcast, real church conversations about church planting and everything else that we want to talk about. My name is Lee Stephenson, lead kind of Converge church planting dude.
Wow, that was an awesome intro, Lee. Executive director of Converge and a lead pastor, church planter. It's hard to remember all of that. So that's great. My name's Danny Parmelee, and I oversee church planting for Converge Mid-America. I am not a lead pastor and have been telling everybody in this COVID season that I'm glad I'm not, because now all I do is just come up with ideas and sit in the peanut gallery and say, man, why don't you try this instead?
Yeah, which is really your spiritual gift.
Yeah, exactly. Just tell other people how I do it if I was in charge.
Exactly.
So fun. It's fun being on the other side for once.
I'm sure. Rub it in. But one of the things, being in a pandemic, I know thinking through touch points is really important for church leadership and church volunteers. Everything from how doors are opened, how doors are closed, how child check-ins taking place, trying to minimize, honestly, just cross-contamination and passing COVID throughout the entire church. I think of two very practical things that have had to be shifted for those that are in-person gatherings. And I think even continuing when majority of us get back to normal in-person gatherings, at least for a long season, it will require of us. And I think of those two areas are communion. How do we do communion? Do we pass plates anymore? Do we share a cup anymore? And then second of all is offering, just the practical, how do we receive and take the offering? But let me pose the question to you this way, Danny. What have you seen done that is a complete mistake when it comes to offering our communion?
Okay, so I don't even know if you saw this or not, because it was going around on Facebook, but there was a remote control car out there, a dump truck, and people would, drop their offering in. And I'm not sure if it was real or not, or if someone was just smart enough to go, if I fake this, this will fund my church because this is going to go viral type of thing. I'm kind of leaning towards the second, but it looked real as people were trying to do it. I'm going to put that on the no-go list. It looked hilarious, but it also looked really ridiculous at the same time for that.
Afforded a little better car and a better.
Yeah. I mean, it was a pretty bad driving from this little remote control car. So I would say passing the basket at all is just out. I don't care if you've got a drone, if you've got a remote control car, it's really just unnecessary. So for me, your simplest is to do the box or the bucket, type of thing in the back, a secure location to do that. But since everything has moved to online, has been even over the last 5-10 years, and then with COVID, it's like you're 100% touchless, type of thing. And this is one of those areas where it's like, man, if I was a lead pastor, church planner, how would I do this? To me, I think that it should still be part of the service, that we don't take the worship element out of giving just because it's online. So still creating an environment where people have a moment to think, to pray, and even if they're regular givers, that they're still thinking about their own giving and generosity to do that. So even if it does mean you've got a special music.
Come up and sing her solo?
What's that?
Do you have the church secretary still come up and sing?
Absolutely. Yes, you have to have that. So, but yeah, I mean, honestly, even if there is a special music or there's video, but that there's some intentionality behind it, and that it doesn't become just, oh, well, you all gave online during COVID, so just give online. And that's it. It's just a quick announcement. You still have that opportunity to cast vision and to train people in what giving actually is all about.
So you're saying it's still important to schedule it within the normal order of worship experience, whether or not it's in person or even virtually.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that you do that. Absolutely. I mean, otherwise what we unintentionally do is we take the worship element out of it. Well, it was just something that you need to do. And so because we're not because before we did pass the basket, or we did a worship song a lot of times during Pass the Basket, because you just needed it for the time,
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, no, let's give people some time to reflect on it. And added bonus, I think that you can use it as a time for people to fill out virtual connect cards. So even if they're signed up already and they're doing, they're doing automatic giving, recurring giving type of thing, use it as a time that they can reflect. They can write prayer requests down. They can thank God for all the blessings that they have. I mean, again, just worship, 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 worship. Make it about worship, not just the function of a financial transaction.
Yeah, and I think don't bypass the opportunity to teach on it. People still need to be reminded and educated why this is an important part of our faith journey. And so look for those opportunities, even if it's a 2 to 4 minute moment that you create in the service. But I think in that process, you have to give very easy, clear next steps.
Yep.
And so if you have boxes or baskets or whatever in the back, point those out. Explain what to do. Explain envelopes are only necessary for cash, and specifically if you want that to be designated a certain way. But I would encourage again, drive. A lot of it's been forced this way, but drive everybody to online giving as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Yep.
And I mean, there's a it would have to look a little different, but there are some church cultures as well where people still walk down the middle of the aisle and they place their offering in the basket as a come and bring, like I'm bringing my
Yes.
offering before the Lord. And I think there's something powerful about that. and,
Yeah.
and so I figure out a way to, I don't know if it would work in every church culture, to do that, but you're setting that kind of moment up, even if a box is in the back and they do it on their way out.
Right.
Create that moment and that focus on that.
I Lee, that is an extreme example, but it is exactly what pastors should be thinking through. Okay, this is what people are used to, and this is kind of what we've done. How can we even continue? I'm not opposed to a pastor or church planner experimenting with that and say, you may have your online app giving in your hand, and you are going to walk up and you're going to hit send when you get to the altar. I know that sounds just corny and ridiculous to some of the people that are out there, but for some, it may work. It's just a matter of asking, how do we create it to be a part of worship?
Yeah, absolutely. And then on communion, I mean, there's traditionally you have the pass the plate method, or you have what we would call the Catholic method,
Right.
of of
Intinction.
yeah, yeah. Um, I say it for that way for the lay people. So,
Thanks.
um, and then I know what I'm talking about too.
Yeah.
But in that process, both of those are kind of a no go.
Right.
And so, how do you do communion in this season of church? And let's talk about two levels. How do you do communion virtually? And then how do you do communion when you do get back to in-person gatherings at some level?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen virtual done fairly well, and especially because you have less of the issue. Like, if people are at home, hey, get your grape juice, get your bread. If you don't have grape juice, it's okay. It's symbolic. You can use soda, whatever, orange juice
Yeah, I
type
have
of
one guy
thing.
in my church, by the way, that brought a glass of whiskey for his communion.
Okay, well, there's
Even
always
I
there's
love
always
communion now more than I've ever.
so we'll just leave the pastors to individually figure that out. That one to me is a little bit easier because you can just train them on that. And again, I think you have a beautiful teaching moment there. Okay, this is symbolic. We churches don't have magic juice, and theologically speaking, it you know doesn't
Our
turn into
Baptist
that.
roots to say that either.
Right,
Yeah.
right, doesn't turn into that. The in person, I'm not sure. What are you guys doing? Have you had communion yet since returning back?
Well,
Or
I don't know if you knew this, but they make these prepackaged communion things that work
pretty nice.
really, really well.
Yeah,
And so we actually, I mean, just this past week was our first in-person gathering,
yeah,
and we did communion just because it was our first time coming back together. I just
yeah,
wanted that moment. So I mean, practically speaking, as people walked in, we told them, "Hey, today's communion." And as you walk into the auditorium, we had very specific, like this is the way to walk in. We had tables set up with the communion elements all prepackaged. They're ready to go. And so we bought the prepackaged kind that you pull the first top, there's a wafer, and you pull the second top, then you can take the juice. Um, and we just told people, as you walk up, grab one and walk out. They were all put out, in a sanitary method.
Yeah.
And then we told people just hold on to it until we get to that part of the service. And then I literally had to walk people through how to do this. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to have to pull off the top, then you're going to pull off the next one
Yeah.
and explain that. And so don't expect everybody can just figure that out. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like IKEA when it comes to, you got to give some very specific direction
Right.
on how to put this together.
I think that is so key that one of the things you said was that you explained the sanitary method that you put it out, because for some people they, are wondering, well, did someone just cough all over these and then, hand them? The second thing would be is I think giving people permission not to, if they don't feel comfortable, and to think that they're, they don't get a spiritual ding on their card if they skip communion because they just didn't feel uncomfortable. Totally okay.
Yeah.
Consider doing communion at home, or if you wait until you're more comfortable, it's not
And
yeah, you're not getting in trouble for that. So
we even put a bottle of hand sanitizer in the middle of the table, and we
mhm.
told everybody to give a squirt of hand sanitizer before they grab their communion thing.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And so there's some practical things. Some of it's a no brainer, but I do think it's part of the just necessary conversation in the times that we're in. And so, great conversation. Thanks, Danny. This has been the Unfiltered Podcast for all those that tuned in. And thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, keep it real.